The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Training Camp Confidential special depth chart released, unofficial. I have to keep saying that, unofficial Deppy released, but we are going to dive in and we're going to take a look at every single position, where guys are slotted, and what this could potentially mean. Now, again, a lot of football to be played. We haven't even had our first joint practice yet. This is sort of like the 53-man roster that I put together that is so fluid because it's one that's been done before everything has kind of transpired. There's been no preseason games. There's been no joint practices. So there's really nothing for them to go off of other than the practices that they've seen thus far. But this week and next week in particular are going to tell the story for a lot of guys as far as, you know, positioning on the roster. And then that last preseason game will be the determining factor for the last maybe 4 to 5 roster spots for guys battling on the back end. So this depth chart, I think, is a good reference point. You know, I love how every year the coaching staff loves to do this, where they try to distance themselves from the unofficial Deppy that comes out this time of the year. Oh, I didn't have anything to do with it. You know, this guy put it out or this guy did it. And then when Ben Standing tried to, you know, talk about Sean, the guy that Dan Quinn said he was the one who did all of this, Dan Quinn then said, no, seriously. Like, I definitely had something to do with this. Like, we know that there's no way the team is going to allow a depth chart to be put out and not have input, okay? These coaches had a lot to do with this depth chart, no matter what they say, okay? They were the ones that gave them the reference points. Now, all of this is not 100% accurate in terms of how they feel about where everyone is, but they do make statements through these depth charts. If you want to motivate a player, hey, I'm going to put your ass third, right? Okay, I want to light a fire under a player. I'm going to move you back. I'm not going to put you at the top of the depth chart. I'm going to move you back a bit and see how you respond to that. Maybe you need a little fire under your ass. Maybe you need a little fire under your feet, right? So I'm going to motivate you that way. So what we're going to do today, this is a special Training Camp Confidential edition where we're just going to focus on the unofficial depth chart because I'm still waiting. I don't know if we're going to get it right because there's no practice tomorrow and they're going to then go to, so I thought the joint practices with the Jets were going to be 2 days. It's just going to be one. It's just going to be Thursday. So they're off tomorrow and they head to New Jersey and then they have the joint practice on Thursday and then they're off again Friday and then they have the game on Saturday. So I'm surprised because I looked at like the Lions and the Giants and they've been joint practicing for 2 days and they've had a bunch of fights and stuff like that. And I expect, and we'll talk more about that on the show later on whenever we hear from the coordinators. I wanted to make this a one big show, but they were taking too long with the coordinator press conferences. So I just went ahead and jumped on and did this by itself and separated it. We'll see if we get, we may not get the, you know, coordinators. We may not, we were supposed to get, this was supposed to be a big day, right? Unofficial Deppy, offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, defensive coordinator, Joe Witt Jr. Like, that's a massive day all in one, you know, day of practice. You're getting all of this great content. I haven't heard anything from them. We've gotten the Dan Quinn presser already. I've digested that already. Waiting on the 2 coordinators. Haven't heard anything. Don't know if we're going to get them. Generally, they do their press conferences early now, being that it's 2 coaches and it's not 2 players. They didn't get them directly after practice. Maybe they're going to wait until a little bit later on, but it kind of feels like we're not going to get it now, right? Kind of feels like they're just not going, they'll push these press conferences back to a later date and time and keep it pushing. So whatever the case may be, I wanted to come on and I wanted to talk about this depth chart. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the Deppy, right? Let's start on the offensive side of the football, and let's talk about the Deppy really quick and analyze this thing. So, I don't think there are many like massive newsworthy listings here per se. I think some of you needed to see some of this because there have been things that I've been saying that I think some of you thought I was just blowing smoke or just talking crazy out the side of my neck. So I think some of you needed to see it in print to really know that, hey, there's maybe some legitimacy to this, right? However, again, I'm gonna say this again, and I'll probably say this 2 or 3 more times. This is unofficial. So again, like there's a lot of movement still yet to take place. This is not the end all be all. This is just a good starting, frame point, reference point. This is a good framework for an initial reference point, right? And we go from here and we start, moving the pieces around from this point forward now. We don't have to guess where guys are. This is where they are right now. All right. This is not ultimately where they may be, but this is where they are right now. So let's start along the offensive line, and then we'll go from there, right? And we'll fan our way out. So no surprises on the offensive line. We had already nailed this a while back when Coleman took over about 6 or 7 practices ago and never really relinquished the reins on the left tackle position. We kind of knew that he had the inside track to the left tackle position. Now it's his to win, or it's his to lose, whatever perspective you want to take. Glass half full, it's his to win. Glass half empty, it's his to lose. Whatever you want to call it, it's his position until he relinquishes it. Hopefully he doesn't. And he puts a stranglehold on it, and he wraps this thing up by the end of the Dolphins preseason week, right? Let's hope that he puts this thing to bed, and we got our starting left tackle, and we move forward from there. Nick Allegretti was signed in the offseason, and he's pretty much put a stranglehold on the left guard position. There's no real conversation to be had. He's the starting left guard. So is Tyler Biadasz, who was brought in here on a multi-year deal, 3-year deal. He's the starting center. Sam Cosmi, we know, is the starting right guard. And Andrew Wiley, I had to offer up a double O because I didn't want him to be the starting right tackle, but it just is what it is. It's where we are right now, and he's going to be our starting right tackle. So no surprises there. Let's get to their backups. So Cornelius Lucas, backup left tackle. Again, no surprises there. So Chris Paul, I figured he'd be the starting, the backup left guard. So left or right guard. They got him at left guard. Cool beans. I figured he's going to be one of the 9 or 10 offensive linemen that make this team. Michael Dieter has cemented himself with his ability to play the guard positions. They've, kind of platooned him in with the first team just to kind of check his temperature as to whether he can, play multiple positions. We know he's a center by trade, but they kicked him into the left guard position and took Allegretti and put him at the second team center for a practice or two just to make sure that Michael Dieter could handle guard responsibilities. And then when Sam Cosmi was out the other day, and really he's been out the last 2 days, Dieter has taken his spot there. So he cemented his roster spot as the backup center and one of the utility guys on the interior. Julian Good-Jones, this is interesting. This is one of the few eyebrow raisers for me where I go, Julian Good-Jones, you say, eh? He right now is the backup to Sam Cosmi. I'll be interested to see when that second unit starts filtering into the game on Saturday afternoon. Is he one of the first guards that gets in, or do they bypass him for a Ricky Stromberg or Mason Brooks? That'll be interesting to see. If Julian Good-Jones is the first guy off the bench at right guard, that's going to say a lot to me as to how they feel about him. And then, conversely, how they feel about Ricky Stromberg, Mason Brooks, and the like. So that's the first thing that jumped out at me when I looked at the offensive Deppy was Julian Good-Jones as the backup right guard. Trent Scott, we know he's the backup right tackle. Nothing to see there. And then you get to the third string guys. You really don't need to go this far back other than Ricky Stromberg, Mason Brooks, and Braden Daniels. Um, I, I really think that Braden Daniels is going to be cut. So I'm not really shocked there. Ricky Stromberg, I still think has a chance to make a hard charge to get into the top 10 and make this roster. Same with Mason Brooks. I think he has a shot, but the rest of these guys, David Nagwanwu, Alex Kingblue, and Braden Daniels, they all feel like guys that are pretty much on the outside looking in at this point. So that's the offensive line. Let's go to the wide receivers. So your first three guys up are Terry McLaurin starting at the X, Jahan Dotson starting at the Z, and then Olamide Zaccheaus is starting inside on at the slot position. So that's interesting for some. I told you guys that Olamide Zaccheaus was essentially a lock. I told you he was like an 85, 90% lock. I think you guys are starting to see that now. Like, they really trust him. They really feel good about him and what he provides. So I think he's a guy that's going to be on this roster. Again, this is unofficial, so don't get too carried away with it. But the fact that he's listed as a starter should tell you that they feel really good about him. And he's a really good football player, by the way. So those are your top three receivers. Backing them up, De'Ami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, and Jamison Crowder. That's another one that was interesting to see Crowder as the immediate backup to Jahan Dotson. Again, I think if Crowder's going to make this roster, and I stand by this wholeheartedly, and nothing's going to change my mind about this, if he's going to make this team, he has to be the primary punt returner. If he's not the primary punt returner, Jamison Crowder will not be on this roster. That's how I feel. He's not going to make this roster off the strength of playing wide receiver. I just don't see that being the case. With all the other guys that they have on this roster, if they want a guy that can just play wide receiver, they can keep Mitchell Tinsley instead. So I think Crowder has to return punts. But right now, that's a good omen for him that he's the first backup, the primary backup to Jahan Dotson. And then I might have it backwards. Terry's the X, Olamide Zaccheaus might be the Z, and Jahan Dotson might be in the slot. But don't pay too much attention to where these guys are lined up, because what they're doing is they're coaching these guys up at each of the wide receiver positions so that they can move around. So Terry is able to play the X, the Z, and the slot. And same with Jahan Dotson and Olamide Zaccheaus. So you really don't get too fixated on who's the X. Now, I did hear De'Ami Brown say that this offense, Cliff Kingsbury's offense, is a lot like college, where they didn't move around, which is not a good thing. Okay. De'Ami Brown talked about, in college at North Carolina, they didn't move around a lot. And remember, one of the knocks on Cliff Kingsbury's offense is that it's not enough movement pre-snap, not enough motion, not enough of, you giving the defense a little bit of eye candy and something to have to digest pre-snap to get them shifting around, communicating, and things of that nature. And De'Ami Brown said that they're not moving around a lot. The X is the X, and he stays on one side of the field, and the Z is the Z, and he stays on the other side of the field. And he said De'Ami likes that, because that's a watered down version of offense. It's easy to digest. It's easy for you to comprehend, and it's not complicated. Now, not complicated allows guys to play faster, so that's a good thing. But I'm not concerned with what you can digest on offense. You should be able to pick up if there's movement and what that, requires of you. I need the defense to be overthinking it, right? I need them to be bumping and having to over communicate, because once this guy shifts to the other side of the formation, it changes their coverages and what guys are responsible for. And now they got to over communicate. That's how you get mistakes. When you just line up where you're lining up and there's not movement, and they can come out, set their defense, and they don't have to change anything, they don't make a lot of mistakes that way. Now you just got to beat somebody one-on-one. But I digress. So nothing really earth-shattering here with the receivers. Terry
Olamide Zaccheaus and Jahan Dotson are your top three. Backing them up are De'Ami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, and Jamison Crowder. So theoretically speaking, if we were being technical, those are your 6 receivers right now. Okay. So a lot of you feel like Jamison Crowder is going to make this team. If this initial unofficial Deppy is any insight as to what the ultimate 53 will be, then you guys will be right. And Jamison Crowder will be on this roster. Again, a lot of football left to tell the story, but as of right now, if we're just simplifying things, those are your 6 receivers, right? Just like these would be your 10 offensive linemen right here, right? This little box right here would be your 10 offensive linemen that you would assume that they would keep. But again, Ricky Stromberg could penetrate this, right? Mason Brooks could do the same. So it's still a lot of time before this becomes crystallized. Let's get to the tight end position because I nailed this one, and I told you I felt pretty confident about this. Zach Ertz, John Bates, and Ben Sinnott are your top 3. If the roster, if they're only keeping 3, those are your 3. There's nothing to debate there. This is one of the easier positions to kind of identify. And then if they go with 4, I think Cole Turner just has more experience than Amani Rodgers and Colson Yankoff. You got to remember, all 3 of these final tight ends, Cole Turner, Amani Rodgers, and Colson Yankoff, weren't tight ends in college. Okay? None of them were tight ends in college. Cole Turner got here as a rookie. Amani Rodgers got here as a rookie at the same time, making positional switches. Turner from receiver, Rodgers from quarterback, and Yankoff was a running back who was a quarterback initially before that. So all these guys are learning essentially a new position. Turner's ahead of Amani Rodgers because he's coming off of injury, and Yankoff is in the first year of making that positional switch. So you got to feel like Cole Turner has the leg up. He's bigger, he's stronger, and he knows the position a little bit better at this point. So if they're keeping 4, Turner feels like the 4th guy to me. And that's what this unofficial Deppy says right now. But again, this is definitely subject to change. And we'll see how Amani Rodgers looks. Remember, he's coming off of injury. I don't expect him to look like the Amani Rodgers we saw pre-injury right out of the gates. You know, it might not be until next year where Amani Rodgers starts to look like the Amani Rodgers that we fell in love with and thought had a chance to be a special player. So we'll see what happens. But those are the tight ends right now, and that's not a surprise to me. The running back position, it's interesting. They have 2 starting running backs here. And, well, they don't have a fullback, so they can do that. But we already knew that, right? And we already knew the 2 backups, right? So you got Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler as the 2 starting running backs. Backing those guys up, Chris Rodriguez Jr. and Jeremy McNichols. The way they have this set up makes me think they're keeping 4 backs. This makes me think they're keeping 4 backs. And I wouldn't be shocked. I told you, I wouldn't keep 4. I got to see Jeremy McNichols. If he impresses me in camp, I might change my mind, or in the preseason, I might change my mind. But this position overall just isn't all that talented to me. After the first 2, I got question marks with the rest of these dudes. So in my mind's eye, I really just need 3 of these dudes. And you can get guys to play special teams at other positions like linebacker and tight end and receiver. You don't have to have a 4th running back for that, to me, at least. So we'll see how this shakes out. I still got them keeping 3, but the way they have this set up makes me think they may be keeping a 4th back. And if they do that, then you have to trim off fat somewhere else, linebacker, offensive line, or defensive line, somewhere along that line. But right now, it's kind of status quo at the running back position. Now you go to the quarterback position, the biggest position of them all. No surprises here, other than Jaden Daniels is your first team quarterback. That's what we all expected. Marcus Mariota is his backup. Again, what we expected. Jeff Driscoll being the 3rd quarterback. I don't know. That might have surprised some of you because there were some of you that feel like Sam Hartman's going to make this team, and I don't know why you feel like Sam Hartman's going to make this squad. But I'm here to tell you that they're not keeping more than 2 quarterbacks. I feel really strong about that. And look, Jeff Driscoll is a veteran, and veterans like Jeff Driscoll, rookies undrafted like Sam Hartman, you stash them away on your practice squad. If nobody scoops up Jeff Driscoll after you cut him, you put him on your practice squad, and he'll be the first quarterback up should something happen to either one of the
quarterbacks that are on the active roster, right? You would prefer Jeff Driscoll and Sam Hartman to both be on your practice squad because you want to continue to work with Hartman, but you want Driscoll because he's an established, wily veteran that if something happens and he has to get in the game, you're not, over here freaking out. If Sam Hartman has to go in the game, you're in trouble, right? So you're hoping that you can sneak Jeff Driscoll through waivers and nobody picks him up, no one puts a claim in for him, and you're able to get him back onto your practice squad. Sam Hartman is going to be on the practice squad. No doubts about that. So, and then, just one more thing on the receivers too. You look at the third guys, Bryson Tremaine, Kaz Allen, and Mitchell Tinsley. I think that's where the cutoff is in terms of who has a shot to make the roster. Byron Pringle, I think I got a bit aggressive with him just because he was here last year, but he wasn't here with this group last year. And I know he can help on kickoffs, but I said this to you guys last night, and I said this to myself after I made the list. When's the last time you seen a guy show up 2 weeks in that didn't have an established name, right? That wasn't a former Pro Bowl player, all-pro type player. When's the last time you seen one of those guys show up 2 weeks into camp and make the team? Generally, if you're the last guy to camp, you're one of the first guys to leave, right? Just like they signed Taylor Stallworth. He'll be one of the first dudes cut when we start trimming off the fat of the roster and get down to 53. He was one of the last guys to get here. He'll be one of the first guys to go, right? Probably going to be the same thing with Byron Pringle, too, when it's all said and done. And then Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, you guys are going crazy when I, had my little mini rant about him. No disrespect to him. I didn't see the value there, but that's nor here nor there. He made one little catch in rookie OTAs and people started going nuts, but I digress, man. I'm not here to throw any shade at anybody. That's the offensive Deppy. So again, nothing crazy. Julian Good-Jones is probably the biggest surprise for me. Like, oh, okay. Let me see what you got. Outside of that, everything kind of looks the way that I thought it was going to look, to be honest with you, right? Nothing crazy here. So now we go from the offensive Deppy to the defensive Deppy. Now, this one threw me a curveball. They're playing with my mind and visually they're altering the way that I'm looking at things. And I'm like, why y'all playing with me for, man? Just come on, man. Just keep this shit status quo and let us like internalize everything the way that we're supposed to. They want to play games, right? Why you wanna play games on me? Why you wanna play? Why they want to play games, right? Like, Dante Fowler Jr. is not an outside linebacker. Why are you playing with me for, right? Stop playing on my top. But that's nor here nor there. We'll get to that when we get to that. Let's start on the defensive line. And let's look at these defensive ends first. And then we'll fan our way out. So, or let's start with the defensive tackles. And then we'll fan our way out to the D ends. And then, out to the linebackers and corners and safeties and so forth and so forth. So, we know what this is. Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Johnny Newton, John Ridgeway. There was some, I read a comment last night when someone was like, oh, they didn't like John Ridgeway in Dallas. Why would they like him here? And I'm like, yeah, that's not apples to apples comparison. Ridgeway is a different player, from when they drafted him. He's an established veteran now. It may have been a numbers game in Dallas. There may have been guys they liked better than him. Didn't mean that they didn't like him. It just means they liked others more. It could have been a number of things. And, they felt like they could sneak him onto their practice squad, and they couldn't. We snatched him up. He's a good football player. He serves a purpose. I think he's pretty much a lock to make this roster. I won't lock him up. Lock him up. Lock him up. I won't lock him up yet, but he feels real safe to me. These guys are all, locks. Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and Johnny Newton, all locks. Ridgeway and Mathis are interesting, but I think when it's all said and done, they keep 5. I'm going to stick to my story. Samson, I stick by my story. They're going to keep 5. And if that's the case, Mathis would be the 5th defensive tackle. But again, no surprises here. Payne Allen starters, Ridgeway, Newton backups, Vidarian Mathis on the 3rd line, but that makes sense. And then you go from there, right? Defensive ends. this is a little freaky for me, a little bit, because again, I consider Dante Fowler Jr. a defensive end, right? So, like, you're messing with my count, you're messing with my numbers, you're visually, you're playing with my mind, and I don't appreciate it, right? Cleveland Farrell and Dorrance Armstrong are your two starters. That was a given. Backing them up, KJ Henry and Javonte Jean Baptiste. Didn't see that coming because I've already told you, I think Javonte John Baptiste is going to be a cut. Like, of all the draft picks, he's the one that I don't see making the team currently. Now, with that said, they could easily take Dante Fowler, make him a defensive end, bump him back one. That makes 4 with KJ, because I told you KJ is going to be the biggest beneficiary of F.A. Obata being on the PUP list. If F.A. were healthy, you take F.A., you slide him up to second, KJ would bump back to third, and that would give you your 4 guys: Cleveland Farrell, F.A. Obata, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler Jr. That would give you your 4 defensive ends. However, F.A. is not healthy. He's on the PUP list, still recovering from the surgery that ended his season last year. So KJ Henry is your second defensive end behind Cleveland Farrell and Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler Jr. I'm not playing this game with them, okay? This outside linebacker bullshit that they're doing here to mess up my count. He's a defensive end. Dante Fowler Jr. is for me. Javonte John Baptiste bumps back to third. Andre Jones Jr. bumps back to fourth in my mind's eye. And so that's the way I look at this. Okay. So that's how I see this group going. Cleveland Farrell, KJ Henry, Dorrance Armstrong, and Dante Fowler Jr. Right. They're playing with me visually because they put Dante Fowler Jr. as an outside linebacker. That would make the linebacker position a little bit odd from a count standpoint, because now you're pushing out one of these linebackers and you might be inserting another defensive end that shouldn't be here, right? That's why I can't like visually do this, which is why it's weird for me, because you're trying to tell me, like, if we're going off these positions, you're telling me that Javonte John Baptiste is making the team, and now one of these linebackers isn't making the team because Dante Fowler Jr. is technically considered a linebacker. I'm just not buying that. So we can call. I'm going to go ahead and make this alteration and say that Dante Fowler Jr. is a defensive end, and now you can bump Jamin Davis up with the linebackers. He's not starting, and this position doesn't matter, which is why they can put Dante Fowler Jr. here, because when we are in our base, there is no third linebacker on the field. It's Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louie. So that's why I'm like, why are you playing with me? You could have just put Jamin Davis there, bumped everybody up, and just kept it pushing. Anyway, I digress. So I'm taking Fowler Jr. out of this mix, adding him into the defensive end. So Jamin Davis is up, and you can do whatever you want here with the rest of these guys. I just figured what they would have done was Jamin Davis up here with the starters, Mykal Walker backing him up, and then you just go about your business, right? Like, and then you keep Keandre Jones and Bo Bauer where they are, and then why we got to play this game? Instead, they got my guy Mykal Walker back here looking like he's trying to get cut. Anyway, I said 6 linebackers. I'm sticking with 6 linebackers. You got Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louie obviously leading the charge. Anthony Pittman, who I thought would have been a guy that would have been, one of the first to get cut. He's established himself as a guy that is not going anywhere, it feels like, in camp. So he looks really comfortable behind Frankie Louie right now. Jordan McGee, we know he's locked in. If we're talking about locks to make the roster right now at linebacker, it's Frankie Louie, Bobby Wagner, Jamin Davis, and Jordan McGee, right? Those are your locks. Pittman feels like a lock. He feels like Olamide Zaccheaus at wide receiver for me right now. Does Anthony Pittman, which is like 85-90% making his team. And then Mykal Walker is like that 6th receiver where you're just not sure. You think it's that guy, but you're not sure. That's kind of where Mykal Walker is for me, that 6th linebacker. He doesn't have to make the team. They don't have to keep 6, but I think they will ultimately. Cornerback. This is looking exactly the way that I thought it would look, right? I told you Michael Davis is a starter.
I told you Michael Davis is going to be the 2020, version of the 2024 version of 2020 Ronald Darby. I've told you that 50 times. That's been my hottest hot take of the summer, is that Michael Davis will come in here and he will be the 2024 version of 2020 Ronald Darby for us. I've been adamant about that. I haven't backed off of that. I haven't shied away from that. I'm going to continue to harp on that because I believe that wholeheartedly. This system is for Michael Davis, and he's going to show why he has the ability to play and play at a high level in this particular scheme coached by Joe Witt Jr. and Dan Quinn. So I'm not shocked that he's starting over Forbes, in this instance. But as head coach Dan Quinn said, and we'll talk about this, on a separate video when I'm able to get the audio from the two assistant coaches, the two coordinators. He said that there's still this three-man weave here, this triangle of these corners, right? Where Juice, Davis, and Forbes are going to play, right? So you don't want to get too hung up on who's starting, who's not. All three of these dudes are going to play, and we're going to need all three of them this season. Be sure of that. We're going to need all three of these dudes to get through this season and have success. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that. But Mike Sainristil, Benjamin St. Juste, and Michael Davis are your starting corners right now. And I do think this is a statement to Emmanuel Forbes Jr., by the way. I do think that this is Joe Witt Jr. remember, he said, I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If he's not playing well, I'm going to tell you. This doesn't mean he's not playing well, but in Joe Witt Jr.'s mind, this means he's not playing well enough to be considered a starter. I think this is a message to him. I absolutely do. So he's backing up Benjamin St. Juste. Tariq Castro-Fields. This was interesting. Castro-Fields over James Pierre, right? That's interesting because if they go in a different direction, say 6 corners, maybe Castro-Field makes the team. If something happens and one of these guys aren't able to go early on, Castro-Fields may be the biggest beneficiary here, right? I told you Noah Igbenogany is insurance for Mike Sainristil. Did I not tell y'all that last night? Because I've watched his career. I know what he can and can't do. I told you he's insurance. He's not State Farm. He ain't Progressive. He's not Geico. He's the general, right? It's not the top shelf, but it'll get the job done. It's better than nothing, okay? So Noah Igbenogany backing up Mike Sainristil, not a surprise because I have Noah Igbenogany making the roster, right? So if you are keeping score at home, these were the 5 that I told you I had making the roster. Sainristil, St. Juste, Davis, Igbenogany, and Forbes Jr. They're all positioned right now to make the football team. Again, unofficial depth chart. I can't stress that enough. But Tariq Castro-Fields is hanging in there. He's giving himself a shot. That's all you can do. And I was somewhat impressed with him last preseason until the very end. I thought he had a really rough go of it, and I thought that cost him a potential roster spot last year. But he's a guy that can play special teams. We know he can play special teams. If he can show that he can play, who knows? Because Adam Peters was a part of the brain trust that drafted this kid in the 6th round in San Francisco. Now, he didn't make the team. He got cut, and that's how he ended up in Washington. But Adam Peters thought highly enough of him coming out of Penn State to draft him. So there is something to that. And then you get to the guys on the 3rd line. Caillou Blue Kelly, he's all but cut at this point. Chigozie Anuzium, again, another undrafted guy that it was a long shot to make it from the jump. And James Pierre, a guy that they signed, I didn't think was going to make this team, but you never know, right? So we'll see. Again, still a lot of time. AJ Woods, another undrafted guy. It's still a lot of time for these guys to make headway and make it interesting. But I think what you see is what you get with the cornerback position. Davis, St. Juste, Sainristil, Igbenogany, and Forbes Jr. are probably going to be the 5 guys that ultimately make this team. And this depth chart kind of bears that out thus far. Then you get to the safety position. Little interesting here because a lot of you have been telling me about how Percy Butler's running with the 2s and Percy Butler's running with the 2s. And I don't know, Louie. Percy Butler's running with the 2s. Lou, I don't know. Louie, I'm telling you, Percy Butler's running with the 2s. Well, what do we have here? Looky. I found Hooky. All right. Jeremy Chin, Quan Martin are your starters. We already knew that, so that's not a surprise. Well, what do we have here on the second line? Now, again, unofficial Deppy, and this could just be, nothing. And Percy Butler could be getting the reps with the second team come preseason and ultimately make this team, and you guys could be spot on. Okay. However, if Derek Forrest is healthy, and that's going to be the key, if he's not healthy, he might not make this team. Okay. It's that real at safety. You can't afford to miss time with this group here, right? Because it's so deep and it's so talented, and they got some tough decisions potentially to make at safety. But if Derek Forrest is healthy, you're not convincing me that this guy's going to go from former starter to not making the team. I'm just not buying that. I think he's a better football player right now than Percy Butler is. But I digress. Derek Forrest is listed as the backup strong safety behind Jeremy Chin. Okay, for what it's worth. Quan Martin's backup is Jeremy Reeves, which is very interesting. Very interesting. And then Dominique Hampton is the rookie they drafted out of UW. So I expect him to make this team. But again, nothing is guaranteed. But I expect Dominique Hampton to make this football team. And then there's Percy Butler. And you know what's interesting here is they could keep 6. These 6 guys that we're staring at. And again, I would not be shocked. And I've said this already. I wouldn't be shocked if they kept 4 running backs. I wouldn't be shocked if they kept 6 safeties. I would not be shocked if they trimmed off the fat from, defensive line or offensive line and to do that, or even linebacker and only kept 5 there, whatever the case may be. This is interesting. This is the toughest position to trim down, safety. And if they don't want to do it, I don't blame them for not doing it. So for those of you out there, Tyler Owens, you see where he is on the Deppy, right? That's where he's going to stay, by the way. He's undrafted. Look at all the undrafted guys. There's not a single undrafted guy that's higher than 3rd on the depth chart at any position, offensive or defensive. The running backs that they brought in here, undrafted, all 3rd string. The tight end was the 5th string, right? And Colson. You look at AJ Woods and Chigozie Newsium and Ben Nickel and none of these guys are higher than 3rd string. None of them are making the team. All right. When you are undrafted, you are a long shot. Sam Hartman is 4th string right now. Okay. So it's fun in the offseason to get excited about, this guy and that guy and where this guy could play. And man, this guy's top. If nobody drafted him, there's a reason. And generally, not all the time, but generally, those guys aren't making the football team. So Tyler Owens, for you Tyler Owens stands out there, he'll be on the practice squad. He'll be on the practice squad. Nobody's coming to get Tyler Owens. Trust me. He'll be here. Trust me. Now, if somebody comes and snatches him up after a strong preseason showing, I'll offer you up a 00. I have no issues with that. I feel confident he'll be here in a practice squad capacity. But these 6 guys right here, Jeremy Chin, Quan Martin, Derek Forrest, Jeremy Reeves, Dominique Hampton, and Percy Butler, I think that group of 6 might be the strongest group of 6 of any position, and that's why I would not be shocked if they decided to keep 6 safeties instead of 6 linebackers, instead of 9 defensive linemen, instead of 10 offensive linemen. As a matter of fact, I think you can keep 9 offensive linemen. To be honest, if we were trimming off some fat somewhere, it'd be offensive line. That's why you cross-train all these guys. That's why you see if a guy can play center and guard. That's why you make sure your tackles can play both sides so that you don't have to keep 10. You can keep 9. 4 tackles, 5 interior offensive linemen, and you go from there. I think you keep 9 offensive linemen, and that's going to allow you to keep an extra safety. That way you got all the guys you need to play special teams. That way you don't have to keep another running back, because I don't think it's talented enough of a group. Whereas it's way more talented here at safety. Instead of cutting a good safety to keep a marginal running back, how about you just keep the running back position at 3 and keep 6 safeties where there's real talent? That's how I would operate, but we'll see. So nothing crazy here outside of them playing with our eyes and our mind with Dante Fowler Jr. listed as an outside linebacker. I don't appreciate the tomfoolery there, but I'm going to go ahead and make the alteration for them and make him a defensive end. Slide Jamin Davis up, slide Michael Walker behind him, and I'm going to keep my group of 6 right here intact in this little box with Dante Fowler Jr. sliding over here and keeping that group of 4 the same as what I had on my 53-man projection as well. So now you get to the last leg, and this is an important one, special teams. So we know about the punter, we know about the long snapper. So those 2 are stone cold lead pipe locks. All right, Tressway is going to be our punter, and Tyler Ott is going to be our long snapper. Place kicker, we have a competition right now. Ramiz Ahmed is listed as first, as he should be. He's been here the longest. And then Riley Patterson just got here not too long ago, so he's listed as second right now. Those 2 will battle it out. We'll talk more about their competition today. Both kickers went 4 of 5 from distance today at practice, so still no real clear separation by either. I'm still waiting for somebody to say, hey, it's me. I'm going 5 of 5 today. Both feel the need to miss at least 1 kick every day. So no one has really separated themselves. So if you're keeping count at home, we've been doing this throughout the process. Ramiz Ahmed is now 20 of 17 on field goals since Riley Patterson showed up in their competition. And Riley Patterson is now 16 of 20 in the competition. So Ramiz Ahmed has made 1 more field goal. But we'll talk more about that when we talk about practice today and get the press conferences from the coordinators and et cetera, et cetera. Here's where the juicy stuff is on special teams, down here at the bottom with the kickoff return and the punt return. This is where shit gets real interesting here. So right now with the first group, they got Noah Igbenogany as the kickoff return man and Jameson Crowder as your punt returner. If this holds true, Noah Igbenogany is definitely making the team because he's your primary kickoff return man, not to mention your insurance policy. He's the general at nickel corner, but Jameson Crowder, more importantly, is making the team because he's your primary punt returner. So I know this for a fact. As much as they might want to put Jahan Dotson back there, as much as they might want to put Mike Sainristil back there, they would prefer not to put those guys back there if at all possible, because they're too important at their positions, on their respective sides of the football, especially Mikey Sainristil. Like, Noah Igbenogany is our backup nickel. We really don't have an alternative there. So I know that while they are trying him back there and they like him, they would much rather find a better alternative so that they don't have to expose him. Same with Jahan Dotson. They would love to put him back there. And I'm not against putting him back there in certain instances if he proves that he can be a dynamic return man. But they don't want to put him back there all the time. I mean, we really don't have a ton of guys that move the needle next to Terry. Jahan is one of the few guys that do move the needle, or can, I should say, move the needle. So they're kind of hesitant to put those guys back there. So Noah Igbenogany as your primary kick returner would mean he's on the roster. Jameson Crowder as your primary punt returner would mean he's on the roster as the 6th receiver. Kaz Allen is going to apply pressure, and I think he's going to try to make a hard charge. I just don't think he does enough, right? He doesn't offer enough. He's not a special teams guy. He's not going down and downing punts. He's not making any tackles on special teams. He's not a good enough receiver. Although he's worked at it, he's gotten better. He's still not a reliable receiver. So he doesn't, to me, offer enough. Now, one thing that Dan Quinn did say is it does matter if guys have the ability to offer, other position ability. So him having the ability to take snaps as a running back, that helps him because he has taken snaps as a running back in college. So that could help him, in terms of trying to make the roster. But ultimately, I just don't think it's enough for Kaz out. He'd have to really separate himself, like return a kick for a touchdown in the preseason and have another one almost go for him to kind of say, for them to say, all right, you know what? He's too much of a difference maker. Because I've already said, if I'm a team, I'm dedicating a roster spot to my return man. If we can find one, like knowing what the rules were, I would have prioritized signing a guy like Cordero Patterson this offseason. Like the Steelers hit a home run signing him. And not for a lot of money either. I would have went out and made it my business. I would have went out of my way. I would have prioritized. Like the Patriots signing Antonio Gibson the first day of free agency makes sense because I would have prioritized getting a kick returner, knowing the new world that we live in now. It's a whole new world, a brave new world with kickoffs. You got to have a dynamic guy back there. Kaz Allen could be that. That's why I won't rule him out. Crowder as the primary punt returner gives him a shot to make this roster. I said it already. I'm gonna say it again. If he's not the primary punt returner, I don't see him making this roster. So he's gonna have to solidify his spot. One good return in the preseason, and he's probably locked it up. One, Dan Quinn has said, you got to be able to make the first guy miss and then get up the field and get 7 to 10 yards. If he can do that one time, and we know Crowder can do that. If he can do that one time, make a dude miss and get up the field and get 11 yards, he's probably going to be the primary punt returner this year. And if that's the case, I welcome him because I know he can play receiver too. I know what I'm getting in JC Ice. JC Ice, yeah. Nothing's better than ice. JC Ice. I'm not tripping if he's here. But that is our unofficial Deppy to this point. And everything kind of looks the way that it's supposed to. I don't think I was kind of thrown off, other than Julian Good-Jones. That one kind of threw me like, oh, wait a minute. What are you doing here? Other than him, I'd say everything kind of looks just like my 53-man roster looked, essentially. So don't feel like I'm that far off. So what stood out to me, though, is how they got the running backs listed as co-starters. They could keep 4. I don't want to put too much emphasis on that. I'm interested to see what they do at safety. That's going to be a wild battle. Obviously, we're going to keep close tabs on the kicking situation. I think special teams might be just as hot and heavy a battle as anything that I'm going to be watching this preseason. Who are they putting? Like, who's the first guy to come out on the on opening kickoff? If we win the toss and we elect to receive the football at noon against the Jets on Saturday, who's back there fielding that first kickoff? When we force our first punt of the game, who's back there fielding that first punt? These are things that that are not lost on me. Okay? These are things that are not lost on me, because most times when we look at those situations, the guys that are back there the very first time are the guys that ultimately make the roster and are back there come week 1. So that may not be the case this time, right? That may not be the case this time. Jamison Crowder could be the first one back on punts, and then ultimately you have somebody, overtake him. They might say Mikey Sainristil has just been too dynamic back there. We got to put him back there, and Jamison Crowder's not your punt returner, right? But I'm anxious to see if this unofficial Deppy holds up when we get to Saturday against the Jets, right? And they start shuffling guys and putting guys in the game. I want to see if this unofficial Deppy holds up. So anyway, I digress. Barrett Downing got one comment and then we'll get out of here. From Barrett Downing, been a member for 35 months. Boy, we getting awfully close. I think you're the first person I've seen hit 35. All right. Getting awfully close to that 3-year mark. Says, looking forward to the season starting. I think we all are. I'm not rushing it, though. Normally I'm so hyper about the season, ready to get to week 1. I'm going to enjoy this ride. I'm going to enjoy the joint practices, the preseason. I'm going to just enjoy every step of the process this year. This is going to be a fun season. And the reason it's going to be fun is because I'm not applying any pressure. I've been through this before with other teams of mine that I root for. And the best way to enjoy seasons when you're young and there's no expectations is to just go in and just let it happen, right? As a wise woman said, let it flow. Just let it flow, right? I'm going to just let it flow. And however it goes, wherever it takes me, I'm going to just go with it. I'm going to just rock. So this is going to be a fun year. I can't wait, man. Bart Scott. Can't wait. So anyway, I digress. We'll be back maybe sooner rather than later. We'll see, how long it takes them to get the audio up for the two coordinators. And then I'll come back, talk to you today. I'll just give you a heads up. Today's practice was the most uneven of camp to this point. Not a good sign heading into the joint practices, but there's an excuse for it, but you just hate to see it. Like you get 10 days in, you've been pretty clean, and now all of a sudden shit goes all haywire on you. But we'll talk as to why practice was so ragged today, and we'll talk about what was said about the two coordinators. I'm dying to hear from Joe Witt Jr. in particular, because Cliff ain't for your shit, right? Cliff is gonna come in, answer your questions, and get out. I'm still tripping off of the, he's like me. So when I go outside, a lot of times I got my, my straw hat, right, with the little strap underneath. Buckle that thing up tight. Got your little straw hat on, right? And they were out there talking about Cliff with the straw hat. He said, "Hey, it's for the sun," right? Like he won't play in that shit. He got serious. I said, "Hey," he's like, "Hey, okay, all right, Cliff, you got it, bro. You got it, all right." Like, Cliff ain't for the shit, all right. So I can't wait to hear what he has to say, and if he snaps on somebody, or if he's just direct, answers the questions, and gets in and out. Like that's what I expect. Joe Witt Jr. on the other hand, he ain't gonna sugarcoat nothing. He gonna tell it like it is. Like I know Forbes not starting. They're gonna ask him about it. I'm anxious to see what he says about that, right? I'm anxious to see, because they're gonna ask him probably about Jamin Davis and how they feel like he's developing, and they're gonna ask him a bunch. I can't wait to see what he has to say. Can't wait. Reedy Davis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Reedy Davis, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Writes, Lou, I'm back, ready for the season to start. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Glad to have you back. And as my guy BD just said, ready for the season to start. I'm just gonna take my time. I'm just gonna take my time and enjoy this thing. This is gonna be a fun year. I keep telling y'all that because it feels different, because it is different. Y'all know what it is. Post up. Take command. Till next time, y'all have a good one. Hopefully you'll be seeing me here in the next hour or so. And we'll be talking about practice and what the coordinators had to say and what Dan Quinn had to say and all that good stuff. But till then, y'all enjoy yourselves. I'm definitely going to be back for a podcast later on tonight with the Brandon Ayuk news and all the stuff that's going on with training camp with the Chicago Bears. There's going to be plenty to talk about. So I'll definitely be back with a podcast episode later on tonight. But you should see me again talking Commanders, hopefully sooner rather than later. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one.